All right. Well, welcome everyone to today's panel. I guess we'll start before introducing everyone and talking about the panel by talking about the answer to this joke. I wish I had a drum roll programmed, but so what gets created when a cheese factory explodes? Debris. Wah, wah. So awesome. All right, I'm just going to stop sharing my screen there. And wanted to welcome everyone to today's webinar. Sorry, fiddling with my screen here real quick. So, you know, the goal for today is to go through a pretty good discussion here on KPIs. We're going to talk a bit about kind of what those are and how they can be impactful to your business. And I want to start with a quick introduction. So, you know, thank you guys all for coming. My name is Doug Pierce. I'm our head of sales here at Sungage. Sungage Financial is a customer-focused lender that we offer low payment financing. We're in 45 states here throughout the U.S. and we really specialize in solar, battery, and solar plus roof and battery loans. Today, we're going to provide some framework to really talk about how to, you know, effectively identify, build, monitor, manage, and leverage KPIs for your growing solar business. And the goal is going to be to really provide you some kind of battle-tested advice on where to start and obviously answer any questions you have along the way there. So we have 4 experts here with us today going to share their experience and talk about some tips that we can all use to incorporate in our daily lives here as we all try to grow and make our businesses more profitable. So we'll start with Melanie Bell. She's our marketing and CX advisor at Bodie. It's a software platform that helps residential solar companies reduce customer support costs by 50% through advanced automation. She's also the co-founder of Strategic Peace, a marketing consultancy that helps B2B companies, especially those in energy and fintech. So a lot of us here, and helps us all generate more revenue. We also have Mike Hornacek. He's a VP of strategy at Straight Up Solar. Mike's a 23-year Air Force veteran, also served as the VP of strategic development at St. Louis-based B Corp, Straight Up Solar for nearly 10 years. Joining hands with his 100 coworkers to deliver residential and non-residential solar integrations and support their ever-growing solar tribe across Missouri and Illinois. Also peering across the horizon to chart the best course for his company while also examining inwardly with his 4-person team at every company workflow and continual process improvement through KPIs. Mike religiously pursues, I'm going to butcher this, but KFATOPDM. That's knowledge fusion.
KFATPOTM.
There. Knowledge fusion at the point of decision making for all, as his guiding mantra. Also here today we have Benjamin Pratt. He's the VP of operations at Soul Logistics. It's a company specializing in aiding solar contractors to consult, implement, and maintain lean operations. He's worked for 20 years in process and operations management for companies such as L3, Lockheed Martin, Buffalo Trace, and Vivint. For the past 6 years, he's been working with Northern Californian solar companies, implementing software solutions, process building, and administrative management. And last but not least, we have Max Kazakov. I'm realizing I should have asked you to make sure I pronounced that correctly before this, but he's the co-founder and CTO of Copernic. It's an end-to-end platform that helps solar and other net zero installation companies break out of the spreadsheet and/or legacy software held by connecting their people, data, and systems, striving to make the clean energy industry more productive and efficient. Is it what makes him get out of bed in the morning? So real quick, Scott very likely is in the comment section here, posted all of our LinkedIns. Feel free to take a peek of that. And also real quick, since we've got going on here, we got a poll that just popped up and we're talking a little bit just to get a baseline of, what does everyone know about KPIs, and give us a sense there. And it looks like from initial reactions, A lot of folks are very familiar, and most common answer looks to be that they guide mine and my company's actions. About a little over half of folks are saying that, and about a third is saying that they guide actions as well. So fairly familiar group here to KPI. So excited to see that. All right, let's kick this off. Cool. Well, we will start here with, let me share the results with everyone so you else can see it. So let's dive in. So I'm going to start with kind of building a knowledge that's really kind of a foundation for what we're going to talk about today as our theme. So for starters, it's really important for everyone obviously to know what a KPI is. From the poll, seems like that's pretty common already. People know what it is. It stands for a key performance indicator, and it's an essential component to successfully growing and maintaining a profitable business. The focus for today is going to be to help you navigate and understand kind of how and why KPIs need to be an essential part of your strategy going forward. And kind of a second but equally important piece of today's discussion will be around this concept process of value stream mapping. Some also refer to this as the customer journey or process mapping. These processes are really designed to allow you to kind of look at your business and visualize all the steps in the solar process. It starts with customer acquisition, follows through to the customer journey, all the way through the sales, installation, closeout process. And having a good understanding of this customer journey is really a great place to start when looking for ways to optimize your consumer experience with KPIs. So this is where we're going to start today. And we'll start with our first question is, really, how can you leverage value stream mapping to identify KPIs for your team and why they're important? So Mike, let's kick it off with you.
There we go. Safety first, mute button off. Thanks, Doug. Appreciate the introduction. Welcome, everyone. Happy to share what little bit I can here to enlighten us all in one small way. Doug, in my intro mentioned I spent almost a quarter century in the Air Force. My particular slice was Air Mobility Command, basically flying 1,000 missions a day. The organization was anywhere around the globe, very dynamic environment. Failure wasn't an option, right? So complex systems, a lot of planning, a lot of parties involved. And I joined the solar industry about 10 years ago. I'm thankful that really value-based and high energy dynamic environment, what I was used to. But one of the lessons I learned there and quickly learned in joining the solar industry is a mantra I'm sure we all know. Pros spend about 80% of the time planning and 20% executing, and rookies, amateurs spend 20% planning and 80% doing, right? And if you want to find success, you need, the key is proper planning. So I'm happy to say when I joined Solar, we were about 12 employees. We're about 100 now. So there's been a lot of growth along the way. It hasn't been linear for sure. Lots of ups and downs. Riding the solar coaster is very familiar to us. But here now, 15 years on in the company, we don't do any major change or evolution without doing proper planning first, specifically a value stream map, right? And just for context, we subscribe very heavily to Gino Wickman's EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System, book Traction. If you haven't seen that, I highly recommend that. We really found our way in the world once we really adopted that about 6 years ago. And that gives context, but the value stream map fits in there because it helps you achieve many of the rocks and annual initiatives and goals that you set through proper strategic planning. So one of the examples I want to give is about 3 years ago, we had a very nascent service department. It really was just a couple of service technicians going out and fixing things, yes, attending some of our warranty stuff and other things, but really not very functional. We weren't billing properly, we weren't scheduling and tracking things. And one thing we did recognize that was going to be stable in the solar industry long-term is service work, right? At some point, we will all have built enough solar. We don't have to build anymore. We just got to maintain what we got. But at some point in the future, if you're not driving to that, you're probably going to have to reinvent your business anyhow. And so we undertook about a 1.5-year long process. We brought all the stakeholders in and quickly began saying, well, where are we at? Where do we want to go? And in that journey, there were many, many hours of meetings. We evolved this and created this beautiful value stream map. Discovered along the way, it's not just about servicing broken systems. You can actually drive value for the company in proactive O&M, right? So operations and maintenance. So we added that. Discovered that remove and replace is another value revenue stream that customers are really interested in having. So our service department is now our summer department. It's O&M and remove and replace, right? And we got there through the value stream map. What the value stream map then also does is it makes you understand the interdependencies of everybody that's involved in that activity, right? We had neglected accounting for years. Well, now accounting is in there, all the other parties, and where KPIs come in, and I'll be very specific, you have metrics and you have KPIs, right? Metrics are things you measure. KPIs are a subset, at least in my perception, right? Where these are the ones you want to watch really closely to make sure that your organization is functioning properly. And we use KPIs heavily here to make sure that the entire system is in balance. If you've done the proper planning, you know what KPIs you need to hit at each phase of your workflow and of your business enterprise. So what happens is you have some well-intentioned or people that will focus on early value stuff. They'll do really great, hit all their marks and KPIs, but the people downstream haven't paid attention to what's coming, or if they haven't taken the time to correlate their KPIs and their measures of success with what's coming down the stream, they will inevitably fail. And so what the value stream map does, it gets everyone into a common operating picture of what we're trying to achieve. Many of us are visual versus analytical or I guess what the term is, right? We use words instead of pictures. That gets us there. It identifies choke points, right? And choke points are one of the first ways to lose balance. So point is you want to deploy metrics and KPIs at the choke points. And dashboard is becoming a quickly very heavily used term. We all like dashboards, but it really is a good analogy, right? Driving a car or anything, flying an airplane, you have a dashboard. You have to fuse the various, boy, I'm going to make a plug for my knowledge fusion at the point of decision making acronym that I love. But KPIs, the value stream map allows you to identify the choke points and the things that need to keep everything in balance and operating well. Identify green, red, and yellow zones in your workflow, right? And post those in front of everyone and get a chance to organize that information in a way that everyone understands together. So that's another recent example. The other reason where the value stream map is very useful is after choke points, it helps you identify places where standard work exists, right? Maybe you were doing a lot of standard work in parallel and you didn't realize it, and you can collapse it all down into one set of standard work that everyone can use, the same form, the same process, whatever. Once you can package things into standard work, right? Whether I'm talking about checklists or SOPs, things that you can actually measure for completion or progress, you now have created the ability to monitor and assess your system for its performance, right? So again, value stream mapping, finding places to find standard work and other things like that. And the last example I want to give is where we can use value stream mapping to solve problems. Look at the definition, right? For value stream mapping, it says, hey, places where you can inject value to save cost or gain efficiency or bring more value to your customer. I'm going to go to Bodhi as an example. A couple of years ago, we were a little younger, a little less years, right? So you've got a lot of experience and growth and things to manage. Customers were complaining about communication and coordination and being left out in the open a little bit too long. So we kind of took the value stream map and said, well, where are the pressure points where customers are most stressed and where we think their information streams matter? And rightfully so, we identified that phase from contract signature to installation start is a pretty apprehensive phase because this is probably the only solar array they're ever going to build. And what can we do to enhance communication, coordination, and reduce anxiety on the part of our customers? Well, Bodhi fit that plug, but the point is about KPIs, right? So then we immediately implemented a customer satisfaction measurement for that phase. We do it separately for sales and installation and closeout and follow-up and everything. But now we can very specifically target our customer satisfaction level as a result of the things we're deploying in those phases of the value stream map. So Doug, if your charge to me was to give you some examples, this is hopefully I've done that and kind of gotten us rolling here with that.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks very much. I think, you mentioned a bit about the cost section. When I think of Melanie's world and marketing and customer acquisition, I imagine is a big part of that. Want to get your take on kind of how you view this topic.
Yeah, I mean, from my experience, when people are starting to look at implementing, whether it's their metrics or the subset, as Mike mentioned, the KPIs of that, there's so much stuff we can measure. I mean, that's part of the fun, especially when it comes to marketing, is like we can totally blow everything out. And I had a client once where like, okay, so what do we want to measure on a weekly basis? And she came back with like a spreadsheet of over 100 different metrics. And I'm like, okay, we need to focus that in. And I think something like, I mean, we do a lot of customer journey mapping, but also whether that's value stream mapping is, I think what we have found is if you can really figure out what matters to the customer at each of those stages, that helps you focus in on what KPIs really are most important, because otherwise it is like we can boil the ocean here with metrics. But I think it really, if you can, the more you can do it from your customer's perspective, what matters to them, of course, the most important thing, they want to know, when is my system going to be installed? But there's all sorts of great data points when you start to architect, how are we going to capture this, that I think going through an exercise in a framework of something like value stream mapping will help you not get overwhelmed with everything you could be measuring.
Yeah, super helpful. I know in my previous life to Sungage, I worked for an installer and we went through the value stream mapping process, and it was pretty eye-opening. So I think for those that haven't gone through that process, just forcing yourself to do it, to do it right takes time. It takes a lot of thoughtfulness. So sometimes the biggest hurdle is just getting over doing it. And it is really eye-opening. Places that you feel are operating at a really high level of efficiency, we found that sometimes that wasn't the case. And on the flip side, areas we felt we were struggling in, we found actually were some of the more efficient and more cost-effective areas of our customer experience.
Yeah, and the great thing with that is there's value in the end deliverable of the value stream mapping, but having those conversations with your team, like the conversations in and of themselves, are immensely valuable, I found as well.
Yeah, and I think that ties pretty well into our next question. So, when thinking of this whole process, right? If you haven't really thought of where to start to take the first bite of the apple, when and where do you start? And once you've done it, how do you determine what KPIs are most important to your business? Max, let me jump into you next and get your take on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Great to be here with everyone. So in terms of where to start, we talk about value stream mapping, and the first stage is really to get a good idea of the as is state, right? Or the status quo, prior to even talking about any kind of goal setting or outcome-based metrics. And then you want to analyze, obviously, the goal state, where you want to end up with the different process centers, say your permitting department on the operations side, or your installations. And a good way to just gauge efficiencies or lacks thereof is to look at a very simple metric, I think, that comes from lean consulting, is you take the process time, meaning that's the total amount of time that work is being touched, the value is being added, and then you divide that by the lead time, which is the entire amount of time that work sits in that stage or that category. Good example is, how long is our project sitting in installation versus what portions of that time, what fractions of the time are we actually touching the project, working on it? And the first time you do it, the results can be pretty astonishing. It's important not to get depressed when we do this with our clients and we roll all the inefficiencies. We sometimes see numbers as low as 0.3, 0.2. That's like the overall efficiency flowing through the value stream. And then after that, you look at the goal state of where you want to head and what you want those numbers to be. And that's how you start developing your KPI strategy. You want it to be goal-based, absolutely, right? Not just numbers in the abstract. And I think there's a good Pareto kind of characteristic to this, right? Where you want to make sure that you're focusing on the quality of your KPIs and not the quantity. And Melanie mentioned, being overwhelmed with KPIs. There's a nice cartoon I like to show our clients to kind of motivate and sell them this process. It's basically a huge dashboard with like 50 different widgets. And then one of the characters in the cartoon says, "Oh, and what's that red line that's just plummeting, going through the x-axis?" It's like, "Oh, and that's how well we understand the dashboard." So we want to absolutely avoid that situation, and the way we do that is just focus on, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 key work centers. That tends to be a good magic number for us with medium to larger size companies. And then you want to make sure that, just to talk about the anatomy of individual KPIs, you want them to be SMART, right? We all know about SMART goals, SMART outcomes. Obviously, they have to be quantifiable and outcome based, but it's also very important to think about 2 other things. Ownership, right? Who's owning the KPI? If this is a project management or a sales facing KPI, people from that work center should be the directly responsible individual that makes sure the KPI gets gathered, it gets updated frequently, gets reported on, et cetera, right? So you want to make sure that you dole out ownership, and that's going to be just part of your culture as a data-driven company. And finally, you want to think also about the frequency at which you sort of gauge different metrics, right? So a good example, if it's, I don't know, number of leads per month, right? You want it to be time boxed to make it more specific, and that way you can actually start plotting charts over time and seeing trends. And finally, you want to make sure that you think about the data sources, right? And this is kind of where our expertise as Copernic comes in. You want to make sure that your CRM or your ERP is flexible enough, right, to make sure that the data points don't have to be explicitly collected, right? You want to make sure that your system of record already makes the data readily available for analysis, for segmentation. And maybe if I could pass the ball to Ben on this one, because we actually had, we crossed paths when we were onboarding his company, So Logistics, to Copernic and a couple other firms that he's worked at. And maybe he can comment on what that KPI strategy looked like from start to finish.
Yeah, absolutely. So in developing KPIs, value stream mapping gives you a lot of data that comes out of it. The first one is customer value. He had mentioned a little bit earlier that they were talking a bit about customer value. Identifying what's valuable to the customer is the most important thing. What does the customer care about? What is the ultimate deliverable? Everything else is waste. Now, some of that waste is essential, some of it's not essential. That's where value stream mapping comes in. You map out the entire process. What directly impacts the value to the customer? What do they care about? They care about, when you go through McDonald's drive-through, they care about getting the same meal in the same way to their expectations each time. They don't care about how it happened, just the end results. Everything on top of that, everything behind that is the very definition of waste. So it's going through and determining what's essential waste and what's non-essential waste. The next step is determining, in that process that's left over, who owns. Max alluded a little bit to ownership of the process. And that's not something that you necessarily assign. That's something that you evaluate and figure out who already owns it. There are people in your organization that already own parts of the process. They just don't realize they have ownership of that. So bringing the team together and having them build your value stream map, both a current state and then the kind of future state. In a perfect world, in a vacuum, this is where we would like to be. Understanding that you'll probably never, ever make it to future state. That's what constant continuous improvement is continuously trying to get to that perfect state. So empowering those people within your enterprise that do already own those portions of the process, that's how you develop your KPIs. So once you've identified and eliminated as much waste as possible, you find out where your centers are of excellence. This is the guy that's the master of this. This is the guy that's the master of that. This lady, she knows this better than anything. Those are the people that all of a sudden are the owners of their process. And they will inform what kind of KPIs make sense to them. How do they do their job? What makes them do their job better? What changes can be implemented? Those are where you're going to find your answers. Most important thing in Lean Six Sigma training that I got through Lockheed Martin was the ability to try to identify and then set ego aside. Managers tend to think that they can come in and they can create processes and they can monitor everything and that they know what they're doing. And the answers are really with your team. It's getting them together, giving them the tools and enabling them to create the perfect process, letting you know where the roadblocks are, as a manager, I always felt my job was just as a facilitator, not as somebody to push, but as somebody to be there. Like the gentleman before, I've got a military background, and as a leader, my job was to facilitate my soldiers, let them execute the mission. The KPIs that come out of that are informed by that. So to kind of come into what Max was saying, I actually started a relationship with Copernic about a year ago. I adopted it for a solar company I was working with at the time. And that's exactly what we did. I gathered the whole team together. I found out, okay, this person typically handles this part of the process, and I had them help me map it out. We used a whole wall and about 10 different colored Post-it notes. We created a huge value stream map. And then once they saw that visual, they could see where the redundancies are, where the time spent an extra that was just waste. In particular, the one thing that was killing this particular solar company was truck rolls. They would go out to a job and they wouldn't finish it, or they would miss just one picture, something super frustrating for management. And I was doing a little bit of calculation, and where we are in Northern California with the distances what they are, we were spending about $700 a truck roll for something as silly as capturing a photo. So, when putting all those things together and I approached Copernic, I had these lists of problems that I had. And what it came down to was the software stack that we were using as that particular company was several different layers deep that you were relying on field personnel to understand. And some of these people could barely understand how to open up the emails. So what we had to try to do is take a process that took up that whole wall, lean it down to just a few key things, and then find a tool to help us manage that, and then to measure how we were doing. As a result, we were able to take that company that was spending almost $27,000 in excess waste for truck rolls and reduce that by 70% in just a month. And that was through identifying the pain points, having the team identify to me what was to include the installers, the surveyors, what was taking so long? Why were they missing these pictures? It wasn't that they're bad employees. It's just that what was the answer? And it came down to a combination of management not understanding what was happening in the field team being given tools that didn't really fit the profile for what they were doing. And so, like I said, we were able to take a tool like Copernic, modify it to what a solar company actually needs, and within a month reduce a $27,000 expense for truck rolls, and reduce it by 70% in as little as a month. And I attribute a lot of that to Copernic's help. But mostly that was to doing value stream mapping, identifying the waste, and having the key stakeholders in there to take ownership of those parts of the process to help inform us how it really needs to be done, and then to help develop the metrics that we need to redefine what success is.
And Ben, one thing I wanted to make sure that you hit on, and it was great, was talking about that technology, because I think that's the other thing is we can't just expect, hey, we're now measuring all these KPIs. Great, we know we've added more reporting or we've added more manual stuff. And so I think this is the stuff where it's like, are you keeping track of the time between different mini milestones, permitting an installation or whatever? Are you keeping track of those in a CRM? How automated can that be so that you're not adding a burden to your team?
Yeah, leveraging technology is a pretty valuable piece in all this, for sure. Because I know when I went through this process, we identified a couple kind of key areas. And that was the first question: is you can manually track these, and are the efficiencies you're hoping to gain lost by spending a bunch of human power to track these things in a manual way? So I know the areas that jumped out to my previous business was, being able to look at cost of customer acquisition. And we had always looked at it as an end of quarter, take the number of sales, divide it by, or the cost divided by the number of sales, and there's your number. And we realized that was not a great place to start. So we started really diving into different sources and then taking blended costs across multiple areas. We also, one of the big things that jumped out for us at the time was how we positioned permitting. We viewed permitting as a cost, as opposed to just another step in the process. And we found we would get all the way to where we're ready to build, and okay, let's go get that permit, and there's a 2-week lag. So all these little things just kind of jumped out, and when you identify one, you make it better. Then we found that we to do a better job of forecasting equipment and making sure that equipment showed up on time. We had the right parts and we're able to build it when we needed to. So all those things combined, I think are important to identify throughout the process, and kind of ties into the next question we have here is, there's a bunch of different places that you can assign KPIs to get a lot of impact. And I know one question I've gotten from a lot of our partners here at Cengage is, what's better, right? Should I start focusing on the front end of the business and focus on sales and marketing? Or should I focus on the back end, post-sale, and really dive into my operational and procurement processes? So Ben, we can kick it back to you. I'd like to get your opinion on that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. What I was thinking was you were talking about the software implementation and then developing your KPIs and all of those things was exactly what she was saying, is identifying all of those different softwares that are coming in. But what ends up happening is kind of what she was alluding to, is you adopt a set of software to provide you with a metric for something that in the end is measuring that metric worth your time or not. And so for me, that brings it back to, is it waste or not? I approach everything, of course, from my training as Lean Six Sigma. Lean is the definition of removing waste from your process. Six Sigma is the study of removing defects from your product. So you take the Lean discipline and the Six Sigma discipline, and somebody is asking a question of references for value stream mapping. Googling DMAIC, value stream mapping, Lean Six Sigma, all of it's interesting reading, because no matter what industry you're in, I've built helicopters, I've bottled bourbon, and I've worked in solar. I've done all these different things, and all of these concepts are exactly the same across any operational platform. And it literally comes down to just those things: identifying your waste, identifying your defects, and then backing into how do you reduce those as much as possible, knowing there's no such thing as a perfect process, only the pursuit of a perfect process.
That's perfect. Melanie, I'm interested to get your take on this topic as well.
Yeah, part of me, like, I run my own company, so sometimes you're just like, my hair is on fire. And whether that's sales and marketing or whether that's operations, sometimes the reality is you have to go put the fires out, and it doesn't mean the other fire is going to stop. But maybe something is more pressing. Sometimes it is like, what is keeping you up at night the most? It is really, I think you can just get super pragmatic about it, and you're like, you can't necessarily tackle everything at the same time. So is it more important right now as your business? Especially if you almost put it into survival mode, and hopefully things aren't quite that bleak for anybody on this call, but it's like, do I have a customer acquisition problem? Do I have a delivery problem? And for the next, maybe that's the quarter. And I think, that's one thing. I'm also a big Gino Wickman fan. And so I think with traction, you can also go, okay, I'm going to focus on procurement operations this quarter, or maybe you tackle one thing in procurement operations and one thing on sales and marketing, but just be realistic. And at the end of the day, there's nothing wrong with being like, I'm consciously choosing to let that fire rage a little bit right now because this one is more threatening.
And then also knowing that you don't necessarily have to put out all those fires. And that's part of what's lovely about having a team, is identify the stakeholders that can help you. In solar, for instance, we have a very specific set process. Almost everybody in all the states that I've worked with solar companies works along the same way, contract all the way to interconnection and having the system up and running. With just those concepts, boiling it down to procurement, finding your choke points. Like for me, my biggest choke point's always PG&E out here, getting an interconnection through, getting a system being able to turn on. It's just boiling all those down to your process, identifying the people, and then trying not to be that manager that's putting out all the fires.
Yeah.
Find a team that surround yourself with people that know. I've jumped around in a lot of different industries, and I know I'm not the smartest person in the room when it comes to any of them. However, I feel like I'm good about putting together teams of people that I can depend upon to go put out those fires, because they own their portion of the process. They know what's there, you know. So taking your team, a manager should probably spend more time with that team mix of talent. Who are my tech guys? Who are my fields guys? Who's got the experience? And making sure that you're mixing your team appropriately. It's always hard to find talent, but for a manager, I find more of my time is spent building the team rather than guiding the team. It's super important to figure out a way to relate and to empower the team that you're working with to put those fires out for you so that you can focus on moving the business forward.
Yeah. And I think one other thing, was, when we started this conversation, 30-ish minutes ago, we were talking about the importance of keeping in mind what's most important to the customer. And one of the KPIs that's really become super important I think like it's everywhere. Probably can't go to the grocery store without it, is the Net Promoter Score. And, if you're not familiar with it, you can Google it because it's a pretty standard calculation, but understanding what your customers are thinking and then also prioritizing what's going to make the most impact to their satisfaction. Where can I lean up or add more value or empower my team to serve that customer better? And I think having those NPS scores and having them at multiple points, like not waiting to the end of the project to find out whether people are happy or not. I think that's really important. That's one of the things that I know Bodhi does well. It's like, for instance, people don't respond to the email NPS. So they're getting text. We're not going to waste people's time asking for an email response. It is at multiple points in the journey. And I think that's also listen to your customers in terms of where to prioritize, I think can also be a really good strategy.
Yeah, NPS is a really intriguing topic. I know at Sungage, we track this regularly and we talk about it in leadership team meetings pretty often. We track it by installer, by homeowner, and we have a couple different places that we look into this. And it is a really great way to gauge customer experience because folks are generally pretty happy to share, especially when solicited, both positive and negative. I think a lot of us think that folks only want to complain and don't want to share the positive, but when you solicit folks to ask them for that feedback, we've been really overwhelmed with both types of responses that we've gotten. And it's great feedback to share, not just selfishly internal to Sungage to work on our product, but to work with our partners to share feedback to enhance their product as well.
There's some questions in there about what kind of teams we're talking about, and primarily I'm more experienced with operational teams, install teams, the builders, the designers, surveyors, those kinds of things. But really, I think these concepts work well for any sort of organization, whether you're doing advertising, sales, any of those things. So building an effective team, that's really hard to give tips on. It's about knowing what they've been saying all along. What's your customer value? What product are you producing? What are your competitors doing? A little bit of benchmarking, finding out what it is you're trying to provide, and then defining that out so that when you're looking for talent, you're looking for those specific skill sets. It's easy to throw out a wide net and pull everybody in and hope you get lucky, but especially in the way things are right now, it's hard to find talent. So it's kind of what I was saying, once you can find some people you can rely on, get that team moving forward, managing that process, you just got to pour as much of your time into talent acquisition as you can. There's not really much good advice that I know how to offer for that on how to build a good team.
Yeah, it also looks like we have a question from Isaac. I'll try and answer it live, and it's curious about customer acquisition success KPIs. Which KPIs are battle tested for the customer journey? And I'm going to kind of try and paint a mental dashboard here. So obviously you'd want to look at your marketing spend, right? So your return on ad spend, as Melanie and Doug were alluding to earlier. And what's also very useful is not just to think of it as like, how much are we spending on marketing versus how much value are we getting out of it, but also segmenting it by lead channel, obviously, right? And analyzing and zooming in on, what are our Facebook ads yielding us versus, our referral or direct email. And then you want to kind of go down the marketing and sales funnel. And obviously you want to look at the conversion rates between the different steps. And again, good software, good analytics tools will help you very, very quickly, like Scaffold dashboard with all the metrics already baked into it. So you don't even really have to kind of think of them. But even if you're just doing this on an Excel spreadsheet, you want to look at your things like, from top of funnel to close, top of funnel to install. And then also one important one for a lot of our customers is the disqualification rates, right? So that's really the rate at which projects get disqualified for various reasons, old roof, if their electrical's out of code, et cetera. It's absolutely important to analyze that to make sure that you're driving higher value leads, right? More serviceable leads through your funnel. And then one last one that I would suggest, and I'm sure the rest of the folks can chime in on this one, is calculating two metrics and then kind of dividing them into one composite metric. And that's lifetime value divided by customer acquisition cost. And in different industries, there's different, healthy green zones, red zones for this value, but the magic ratio seems to be 3 to 1, right? Where over the course of the lifetime's value, that's 3, divided by 1, it's essentially costing you 25% of your customer lifetime value to acquire that customer. And once again, you're going to have to fine tune those numbers and find a good equilibrium for your trades, for your products, especially if you're doing more than just solar. And I don't know if the rest of you guys have anything to add in terms of lifetime value or sales metrics. Maybe Melanie, from your perspective.
I wanted to jump in real quick on, there was a question about how to tackle solar company KPIs. I know, Mike, this feels like something you could certainly jump in on.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. The question I'm reading here is, can speakers be more specific about solar business KPIs? So I'll just tell you what we use as our weekly KPIs, right? Number one is build ready queue. That is total project count, value, and KWs, right? Like, what do we have that's actually buildable? How much do we need to stress? Are we at a 6-week queue or a 12 or 20-week queue? Sales and marketing, very traditional, leads, opportunities, proposals, and contracts. Installation, design, permitted, procured, and installed projects. Here's a really important metric: crew equivalents per day. We define a crew as a 4-person entity, electrician and 3 installers. We recognize they can generate, if everything, all obstacles are removed, X amount of revenue per month. So, not just the crew equivalents per day, because that tells you your revenue generating capacity, or what you're actually mounting every day. But I'm going to back away and say, at a monthly level, what is my dollars revenue per crew equivalent per month? In other words, am I generating $250,000 a month per crew or $310,000? That really matters and is a real good measure of your overall team efficiency. We don't measure hours per KW for a crew. We've retired that long ago. Our crews all do well enough. But the one right now it's a great measure of the entire team's efficiency and ability to mount and get everything ready and get a crew out there. Financials, very classic: invoiced, AR, AP, cash collected, cash balance. Service, right? Service ticket count, how are overdue O&M visits, and then safety violations and incidents. Last comment I want to make is, for every single metric we post, we have a green zone, 2 yellow zones, and 2 red zones, right? You might say, Mike, I would just expect yellow, red, or green. Well, everyone gets it when you're underperforming, right? But you got to be careful about overperforming, because I talked earlier about balance. And when your system gets out of balance, that creates stress that you have to deal with. And in many cases, it was self-imposed because you didn't measure or foresee it coming, right, down the line. And your metrics and your KPIs can help you do that. And so we very much take, and last comment about the weekly KPIs, getting your people involved in appreciating and understanding them. Every morning at our weekly ops review meeting, the whole company attends. We review last week's KPIs together as a team. And we actually get rank and file members to brief them to their fellow teammates. So, a new installer, 2 months on the job, could be briefing the KPIs. We don't tell them to just read the numbers. We say, I want you to interpret them for everyone, right? And yeah, people struggle in the beginning. It's a nervous, anxious-filled time, but they're not alone, right? And the truth and honest conversations about that really helps expand the company's culture and awareness, understanding the importance of KPIs, and then how they all relate. It's not just, hey, sales is doing great. Well, look, sales is doing great here. And in 3 weeks, we should expect this to happen in ops and so on down the line. So hopefully I helped answer some of the questions on that.
I think
Yeah, and what? Oh, go ahead, Melanie.
I was just going to add one more thing, and it's a KPI. It's, I think, very related to solar, that we've been talking a lot about boating. We talked about customer lifetime value, is looking at what is the customer lifetime value after their initial contract. So looking past the installation and looking at, okay, so what are all of the ancillary services or EV charging stations, and getting an idea of what that, I guess, for lack of a better term, like a secondary lifetime value is, I think is a really interesting one, as solar companies are looking to extend the lifetime of their customer and looking at other revenue channels. I just wanted to suggest that one as a potential KPI as well.
Perfect.
Absolutely. And of course, referral rates. But we can maybe discuss that in the breakout rooms.
Yeah,
We're
this has
running up
been
on
a
our time.
great conversation. So on the topic of breakout rooms, I think we're kind of right on schedule within 3 minutes here. So obviously it's been a great conversation, and I know the questions are starting to pour in. So we're going to share the link again to the breakout room. You go in there and select which of the panelists you have questions for, and be able to kind of ask some more specific questions there. If you're unable to stick around, just thanks for joining. You can contact the panelists through our LinkedIn profiles here, which someone from Bodie will copy and paste here soon. Actually, I can copy and paste these here real quick. So for those that are sticking around, we'll go ahead and copy in that link. You just hop into the new breakout room and pick who you want to see, and we'll see you all in there.
Yeah. And just so people know, it is a different Zoom meeting. So you'll end up leaving this webinar and going into a Zoom meeting on that link.
All right.
And are you going to be pasting the links here, Doug, or do we just use the ones that we have?
They're right there. So everyone should be able to see that link, and you click there, it'll take you out, and we'll see you in the breakout rooms.
Thanks, everyone.
Perfect.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.